Here I'm going to talk about cortisol, one of the hormones of the adrenal gland. The adrenal gland sit on top of the kidney, and they're important in controlling metabolism and response to injury and stress. Through the actions of cortisol, it will regulate blood glucose, protein turnover, and fat metabolism. Through aldosterone, it controls electrolyte balance, and cardiovascular tone is altered by epinephrine and norepinephrine. As I said, its response to injury and stress makes it a vital part of human physiology. You can cut the adrenal gland into two sections, the medulla and the cortex. The cortex is the larger part of it, and it's here that cortisol is released in the fasciculata. The adrenal gland also releases aldosterone, which is important in sodium retention, and then the reticularis releases androgens. The medulla then releases epinephrine and norepinephrine, and these modulate both your glucose metabolism, fat metabolism, and also your sympathetic tone. The release of cortisol is controlled by the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal gland axis. In response to stimuli, whether it's stress, sleeping, and going into waking, feeding, anxiety, depression, you get release of CRH, corticotrophin releasing hormone, from the hypothalamus down the median eminence onto the anterior pituitary, which then stimulates the release of ACTH. That then stimulates the release of cortisol, and cortisol feeds back on the anterior pituitary and the hypothalamus to inhibit the release of both CRH and ACTH. ACTH also feeds back on the hypothalamus and inhibits the release of CRH. So there's multiple feedback loops happening here. There's both long loop and short loop feedback in the control and regulation of cortisol release. So you can see here that both ACTH at the top and cortisol at the bottom have a pulsatile release over 24 hours. And it has a rhythm each day. It is highest at the end of the sleep cycle because cortisol seems to have neurological abilities that make you wakeful, make you alert, and gives you energy. And then conversely, it is lowest just before you go to sleep. But during the day, it has a pulsatile fashion. If we were to mean many patients, you see that this peak at the start of the waking hours is more pronounced, and we see less of the pulsatile fashion as it's averaged out. So cortisol is released by the adrenal gland, by cells in the zona fasciculata, and it's a steroid hormone. It comes from cholesterol, like testosterone, like estrogen, like aldosterone. It's a steroid hormone, and it's insoluble as a result. It's stimulated by ACTH, and because it's insoluble, it's bound to cortisol binding globulin as it's transported through the blood. It has a half-life of about 70 to 90 minutes, and it's removed from the blood by the liver and then excreted through the kidney. It's lipophilic, so it goes straight through cell membranes, enters the nucleus, and alters gene transcription and enzyme production in its site of action. And it controls metabolism. It's a glucocorticoid. It raises blood glucose levels, and it's involved in modulating response to stress. It's a very important immunosuppressor, and it also, in high concentrations, is a activity. What it does metabolically is it stimulates proteolysis and then stimulates gluconeogenesis in the liver. It will prevent muscle uptake of glucose to maintain blood glucose levels, and excess glucose will be stored as glycogen. It also stimulates the breakdown of fatty acids from triglycerides, and in that fashion raises the amount of utilizable substrate, keeps blood glucose high, and as a result it's known as being diabetogenic. It increases the blood pressure because it's permissive for epinephrine production, and as I said earlier, it suppresses the immune response. It also has many other functions around the body, but those are the aspects we're going to focus on here. We can see what it does to protein turnover here. So as you inject cortisol over 0 to 8 hours on the x-axis, you can see plasma concentration of different amino acids. And you'll notice that over time, the concentrations of isoleucine, leucine, and valine all increase. Alanine, however, does not. But that's because the liver is now consuming alanine and creating glucose from it. So cortisol has the effect of increasing the concentration of small substrates in the blood, amino acids and glucose. But if you look on the bottom, the blood production rate of alanine, though, is very high. And so with cortisol, you create a lot of glucose.